So in this video, I'll tell you how the toughness of the Kushites and Kushites with a K, and I will explain why Kushites with a K made the Persian king to murder his brother, and also led to the end of the Achaemenid dynasty in Persia, the Achaemenid dynasty proper. The Achaemenid dynasty, I would call it proper, ended with the rule of Cambyses. It did continue after that through Darius, but Darius was not directly a descendant of the Achaemenid family. He claimed to be part of the Achaemenid family. It was just a claim he made, and then he went ahead and married a woman from that family by the name Atossa. And then it is now in history considered that Darius was part of the Achaemenid dynasty. But the Achaemenid dynasty basically ended with the death of Cambyses. In this video, I'm going to explain how that was brought about by the actions of the Kushites. The Persian Empire was humongous. It was huge, and the beginning of the Persian Empire was tribes in that region that we know today as Iran. And there were tribes there, mostly shepherds, herdsmen. They were pastoralists for the most part. But then at some point, one man became very popular amongst the tribesmen because of his wisdom. He was able to solve conflicts between different clans and tribes, and at some point they made him to be king, and he became the king of the Medes. Now the Medes grew, and at some point they ruled over the Persians. The Persians were their neighbors. Now it is through this interaction that the Persian Empire emerges, and it emerges through Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great was a grandson of the last king of the Medes. And even though that last king of the Medes was a Mede and Cyrus was a Persian, it was the daughter of that last king of the Medes who got married to the Persians and is the mother of Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great, of course, went ahead and conquered a lot of land. He conquered the Lydian Empire, one of the largest empires during that time, and he ended it basically. The Lydian Empire was in the region we know today as Turkey. And then the Persians, of course, conquered Babylon, and they later on conquered Egypt, even though it wasn't under Cyrus at this point. Now, Cyrus died we can say, an anticlimax, or we can say he had an anticlimax end, because after conquering such great empires like the Lydian Empire, he goes to the east, and he was basically like trying to bring more land under the rule of the Persians. And he comes into contact with this small tribe of the Masagitai. And this tribe was ruled by a woman. It was a woman who was the queen. She had all the power in that part of the world, and she ruled. And seems like Cyrus underestimated her power, and he just wanted to walk through her land, and did treat her with some contempt. And when this queen sent her son to go and tell Cyrus, or to basically negotiate with him, Cyrus killed this young man. And that enraged the queen, of course. This is her son. And she comes herself to face Cyrus, and she ends up killing him. Now, that becomes the end of Cyrus the Great. Now, after he's dead, his son, Cambyses, becomes the next king of the Persians. Now, Cambyses was not straight up in the head. He had some issues, especially going by the things he did as a king. Now, the first thing that Cambyses does after becoming the king of Persia is to try to prove himself, like to try to get out of the shadow of his father, and to prove himself like he's also very powerful and he can do things like the father did. And he decides to attack Egypt. And Egypt at this time was like the center of the world. It was a big empire. It was respected in the ancient world. And he decides to attack Egypt. He goes to Egypt and he conquers it. He manages to take over. And for a moment, he decides to stay in Egypt, and he decides to do more campaigns while in Egypt. He decides he was going to attack the neighboring tribes of the Ammonian, to the west, to the south, to the west, yes, the Ammonian to the west, and then the Phoenicians of Carthage, of course. So he decides to attack those. And then he decides to attack the kingdom to the south of Egypt. Now, this is the Kush kingdom, or the Kush Empire. Kush Empire is an empire that lasts for a very long time, close to 2,000 years. And now Kush is where the name Kushites come from. And the general understanding is that all languages that are Kushitic are descendants of the language that was spoken in the Kush Empire. That's where the name Kushites come from. But Kush, of course, is written with a K, so that's why I said Kushites with a K. Now, he decides to attack this empire. But how Herodotus, the name Herodotus uses for this empire is not Kush. He calls it Ethiopia, and he calls the people of that land Ethiopians or Ethiops. Now, but when you read the entire Herodotus record or book, you realize that when Herodotus uses the word Ethiopia, or maybe it's not him actually, it's the people who later on translated the book, the word Ethiopia is used for all basically black people. It's basically that's how it's used, like it's all black people or like Ethiopians basically. So he decides, but we understand that it is Kush that Cambyses is attacking, because it's just to the south of Egypt, and that was the empire that was there at that point. Now, Cambyses doesn't go directly to attack the Ethiopians, the Kushites. He decides to send spies to that land, and he sends these spies under the leadership of a guy who went by the name Archaeopagi. Now, Archaeopagi was selected because he spoke the language of these Ethiopians, and he's told to go there and to investigate and to collect as much information as he could, so that this information could later be used to attack the Ethiopians or the Ethiops. Now, Archaeopagi goes with a group of people, and they carry some gifts to go present to the king of the Ethiopians. And when he arrives there, they are welcomed, and the Archaeopagi tells the king of the Ethiops that he's come because he's been sent by the king of the Persians, and the king of the Persians wants to have friendship with the king of the Ethiops. And the king of the Ethiops tells these people, we are not stupid people. We know what you people want to do. We've seen what you've done to other nations. You have attacked other nations that have not wronged you. And we know you people are planning something against us. But anyways, they welcome them, they feed them. And there's another thing that Archaeopagi and his entourage wanted to find out, was something called the Table of the Sun. This was something that was spoken about in the rest of the ancient world about this Kush Empire. And that is that there was this table at some place near their city where food was always placed at night, mostly flesh, cooked meat, and milk. And anybody who wanted to eat will come during the day and eat to their full. So this became a story that was told everywhere, and it seems like it was such an interesting story, because the Persians wanted to find out, is it really true that there is a table of the sun? And they proved it was true. Now, some of the gifts they bring, the only thing that the king of the Ethiops liked was the wine. He took the wine and he was like, this tastes good. But they brought him ornaments and he was like, no, we don't want that. They brought him robes and he was like, it's terrible quality. And he asked the Persians, so what do you people eat where you come from? Or what does the king of the Persians eat? And they told him he eats bread, and he laughed and he was like, oh, that's terrible. Here we eat flesh and milk. And he's like, how long do you people live? And he's like, oh, we live up average 80 years. He's like, yeah, if you eat such terrible food, of course you're not going to live long. Here we live up to 120, 130 years. That's how long we live. And Herodotus describes these people, the Ethiops, as the most handsome people in the world, in the ancient world. And he says they were very tall people, very strong people. And so after they've presented these gifts, and now the king of the Ethiops decides to give them a present. Now, it is this present that creates problem in the Persian palace, you can say. It is this present that leads to Cambyses killing his brother. Now, the present is a bow. And this bow was a very tough bow. And the king of the Ethiops tells Asiopagi, go tell your king Cambyses that the day one of your men will be able to strung or to tie this bow and pull it, that's the day you should consider coming to attack us. And he gives them this bow, and they carry it, and they go to Egypt. At this time, Cambyses is based in Egypt. And they go, they tell Cambyses about the stories they were told by this city. And Cambyses becomes very angry, and is like, he feels disrespected. He feels like these people don't understand who Cambyses is, who the Persians are, and he wants to teach them a lesson. And but they try to do the bow thing. Everybody fails around Cambyses. Even Cambyses himself could not do it. His guys around could not do it. But one person did it, and it was his brother, Smerdis. Now, Smerdis was his actual brother from the same mother. Remember, the Persians were polygamous, and Cyrus had many kids from different women. But Cambyses was Smerdis was his actual brother. And there's another story about Cambyses becoming the king of the Persians. He wasn't really the first son. There was an older son, but somehow he was bypassed by some technicalities which were provided by the former king of the Lydian Empire. That's another interesting story. Anyways, so Smerdis is his own brother from the same mother. And Smerdis manages to pull this bow. You would have expected that Cambyses would have been happy that, yeah, one of our guys managed to do it. That means we can go and attack the Ethiops or the Kushites. But no, he became jealous. He became jealous about that because he's not the one who did it. It is his brother who did it. And because of that, he sends Smerdis away back to Susa, to Persia. Now, Smerdis goes back home. And not long after, of course, almost immediately, Cambyses tries to attack the Ethiops, and he goes up the river Nile. And before he reaches the Kush Empire, his soldiers did not have enough supplies, and their supplies they could not take them that far. And at some point, they didn't have food. They started eating animals and grass. It was such terrible that they turned around and went back. Now, Cambyses is back to Egypt after failing to go to Ethiopia. And he's not very happy, of course. And he's sleeping one evening or one night, and he dreams. He has this vision that Smerdis is planning something. And this dream is the way Herodotus explains it. It was kind of fueled by his jealousy of Smerdis being able to pull this bow that came down from the Kushites. And he sends one of his friends to go and murder Smerdis secretly. Now, this friend goes, murders Smerdis. Nobody knows about it, but a few people in Susa found out that Smerdis is dead. But these people they are called the Magi. They were like maybe the prophets, you can say, the religious leaders, something like that. And they knew about it. And so Smerdis is dead, but the general public doesn't know that Smerdis is dead. Cambyses is in Egypt. The Magi who knew about the death of Smerdis, they picked another guy who looked like Smerdis and started taking him around, making the public think that he was Smerdis, actually. And Cambyses hears about this, and he asks his friend, the person he had sent, I thought you finished this guy. What is the news I'm hearing from Susa? And it's like, yeah, I did it myself with my own hands. But Cambyses doesn't believe it, and he decides to go back to Susa to take care of that, to see what's actually happening. And it's while he's in his way back to Susa that he dies on the way. How he dies is another interesting story about him and the Egyptian god Apis. That's a different story. Anyways, he dies. Now in Susa, Smerdis, the imposter, becomes the new king. And for a while, nobody knew that he wasn't actually Smerdis. And at some point, one person by the name Darius knows about it, a young man. And Darius comes to Susa, and he organizes you can call it a coup, and he topples the fake Smerdis from power, and he becomes the new king of Persia. And the way Darius becomes the king of Persia is also another interesting story. Anyways, all these stories are told in in Histories by Herodotus, which is a book that was written about 2,400 years ago. And it is one book that is often said to be the first serious attempt by someone to write the history of the world. It's not just history, though, in the book. It's geography. It's you can say some anthropology work. I did a lot of work trying to explain everything that was happening, that had happened before, that was happening at the moment, how things were and how things had turned out up to that point. Yeah, so that's how the toughness of the Kushites led to the Persian king murdering his own brother. Those are my random thoughts.